Welcome back to Behavior Shift. Today we're talking about one of the sneakiest biases out there. And the reason it's so sneaky is because when it shows up, it actually feels like you're making good judgment.
Yeah, Ben. And today's culprit is the availability bias, also called the availability heuristic. And it's basically your brain saying, if I can think of it quickly, it must be important or likely to be true.
Which at first glance sounds reasonable, but it really isn't.
Yeah, of course, right? And here's the simple definition: the availability bias is a mental shortcut where we judge how common or likely something is based on how easily examples come to mind. So if it's vivid, if it's recent, if it's emotional, or if it's talked about a lot, we tend to overestimate the probability of it.
So it's our brains using memory speed as a stand in for actual true probability.
That's exactly right, Ben. And to be fair, that shortcut, it works an awful lot of the time, right? Our brains are under constant pressure to make decisions quickly, often with incomplete information. So analyzing all the possible data is really expensively when we think cognitively, right? It's computationally and energetically expensive for our brain to be doing all of that computation.
So really our brain is using the availability bias as a efficiency hack.
Yeah, and it's a very useful one, but like all shortcuts, it breaks down in very predictable ways.
Okay, so give us a classic example.
Shark attacks, Ben.
Ooh, scary.
So, right, people are terrified of shark attacks. But if we think about the statistics or your odds of dying from a shark attack, they're really low. They're about 1 in 250 million, according to most of the research that I found out there, at least in the US. And then, meanwhile, everyday objects like vending machines. When I say vending machines, Ben, do you get scared or terrified?
Not really.
No, but you should be because
I
they're
get
they're much
hungry,
more
I get hungry.
they're much more likely to kill you than a shark would. And approximately 1 in 112 million people, that's the likelihood of potentially dying from a vending machine falling on top of you. So, in other words, falling vending machines kill roughly twice as many people as shark attacks do.
Okay, and yet Shark Week exists.
Right. We don't have vending week, right? It's not there's not the big thing there. But shark attacks are rare, but they're vivid, they're emotional, and they're sensationalized, right? It's the oh, the shark attack happened in Florida or in Australia. It's worldwide, and we hear about them from the news. So the examples come to mind easily. Meanwhile, car crashes, far more common and dangerous, barely register on our mental highlight reel, and definitely vending machine accidents are not up there, right?
So this fear that we're experiencing is actually tracking headlines and what we're seeing in the news as opposed to the reality of the situation.
Exactly. It's trending, it's tracking those headlines. That's perfect way of putting it. And this happens because with the availability bias, we're strongly influenced by recency. So how soon or how recent something had happened to us, right? And media exposure. So how often do we see it on the news or in a magazine or on a billboard or wherever else? So what we've seen lately or what is also emotionally charged feels more frequent than it actually is.
Exactly, and Daniel Kahneman talked about this a lot, when we talked about System 1 and System 2 thinking a little earlier on in a previous episode. Um, System 1 thinking mistakes that ease of recall for the likelihood of the event or the information actually occurring.
Right, and here's another comparison. The availability bias is like an optical illusion for your mind, right? So your visual system uses shortcuts to interpret the world quickly, and most of the time it works beautifully, but sometimes those create illusions. The kind of where it's like, oh, you look at it one way and it looks like a rabbit, and you look at another way and it looks like a duck, right? So
Yep.
this is a different type of illusion for your brain.
Yeah, it's a cognitive illusion.
Exactly, and that's not stupidity, right? It's not saying that we're dumb. It's just that efficiency is misfiring, so
Yeah, exactly. And so this availability bias, it let's clarify, it doesn't just impact fear. That's just a really good example. It actually affects our decision-making processes too, correct?
Absolutely. So think about investing. If you keep hearing stories about someone who got rich buying, a single stock, Tesla or Nevada or whatever it would be, that outcomes feels much more likely than it really is. Base rates, those boring but important statistics, get drowned out by memorable anecdotes.
Mhm. Another good example would be looking at leadership in organizations. So, one recent bad experience, vivid bad experience that happened recently with an employee can actually outweigh years of solid performance because that example is the freshest thing within the memory.
Yeah, and this goes with performance reviews as well. So, if you only do a performance review as a leader once a year, what comes to mind are those more recent activities from that employee, not the things that they did at the beginning of last year that were great and different things. And so take that into consideration when you're doing behavioral, or reviews for your employees, right? And even at a societal level, let's look at public spending. So, cancer poses a far greater risk to American lives than terrorism, yet military and defense spending massively outweigh cancer research funding.
Which is crazy. And that's because terrorist attacks are they're shocking and they're memorable, they're vivid and emotional. And cancer is tragically something that's more common and quiet. It's something we're used to.
Yeah, and that's the danger, Ben, right? Availability bias doesn't just distort what we fear, it distorts what we prioritize. And I think that's really important.
So how do we protect ourselves from this?
Um, So first, notice that feeling of certainty. If something feels obviously risky or obviously important, ask, all right, where am I getting this data from? Right? Is it something that I'm thinking about because I know the base rates, or is it just because, hey, I saw that, red car yesterday. So all cars, there must be a lot of red cars out on the road
Hmm.
today. Second, you need to ask about base rates. How common is this actually? Not how vivid or how frequently I see something, but go to the base rates, right? There's some really great work by Kahneman and Tversky about the difference between, farmers and bankers and different pieces along that line. Won't get into that there here now. Third, widen the frame. This is an important one. So actively look for information that didn't immediately come to mind. This is really a way of, like, hacking back into your system too, thinking, right? So, bring that back online and make that, kind of framework that you're looking at, make it wide. Don't just get so focused in on what was most recent or vivid or memorable.
Great advice. And so what's the one big takeaway here with the availability bias?
Just because something is easy to remember doesn't mean that it's likely. And just because something feels urgent doesn't mean that it necessarily deserves your attention.
Perfect. So the availability bias, it makes loud feel important and it makes quiet feel irrelevant.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah. So think about it this way, right? Better decisions come from resisting the pull of what is just most memorable, easy to recall in your brain, and that we need to make sure that we're grounding ourselves in what's most meaningful.
Spot on. Well, that there is the availability bias for you. Thank you, as always, for listening to Behavior Shift.
And remember, don't let your vivid memory decide for you.
Great advice.